JD Harbour, thank you so much for being on the Authors on Audio podcast. How are you doing today?
I am fabulous. How are you doing today?
I'm awesome. I'm super excited to be talking about your book, Golden Shores. So the first question, how did you get into writing?
So, leaving high school, this is going kind of way back in the day. I was a young punk in high school, didn't do good hit or anything, didn't have a whole lot of choices as far as career path. And so I joined the military, and I was blessed with a great opportunity. My career or my military career took me into the path of public affairs or public relations. And that kind of sparked my love of meeting other people and telling stories. In the military, specifically, Private Johnson from middle of Mississippi, he joined out of high school, or he's there to support his family or whatnot, getting to tell his story and sharing that story back with his hometown, and kind of telling all the great things that the soldiers were doing on the ground. That kind of inspired my storytelling. And then later on, after I got out of the military, I had been in kind of a somewhat of a midlife crisis rut, you could say. I was looking for, a creative inspiration in my life, something where I could express my feelings in a creative way. And, my brain just kind of drifted back to that storytelling. So it just, one led into the other. I started with telling other people's stories, and now I'm telling other people's stories, but in a fictionalized world.
So what does your writing process look like then?
So it has definitely evolved over the last several years that I've been doing this. When I first started, my first book that I wrote was Scarlet Wave, or what became Scarlet Wave, and it was pretty much a fictionalized version retelling of my love story of how I met my wife and everything like that. And it just kind of started going, like, trying to fit my story into the fictional characters. It wasn't really flowing as well as I wanted it to do, so I kind of took a back seat and dove into learning the science behind plotting and character development and all these other things, where I then took those lessons and I wrote my first two books, the first two that were released, which was Emerald Tide and Sapphire Seas. And that's kind of where everything developed into more of a plot-driven, or not a plot, character-driven structure, to where I was outlining, I was discovering everything I needed to have in the story first, as opposed to being a pantser like I was off the bat.
So you kind of evolved into more of like a plotter then?
Yes, definitely much more of a plotter. And then even as far as like this series has gone on, I've now built up a murder board in my office to where I have characters drifting from one story into the next. So now I've got to try to keep track of, all right, Harper was over here in this story. Now she shows up over here. How has she changed in the meantime and stuff? So it's become its own interwoven web of sorts.
Yeah, I imagine like the longer a series becomes, especially if the characters are all kind of interconnected, like maybe each book focuses on its own couple or whatever, but people pop up like here and there, it probably gets to be a lot to keep track of after so many books, I would think.
Yes, but it's fun though. And
Yeah.
you get to, kind of revisit some stories here and there as well.
So you mentioned that Scarlet Wave was, kind of based on how you met your wife. Is that why you landed on romance, or was there something else that kind of fueled that?
It was twofold. Yes, it was. I wanted to retell my wife and I's love story, but also, there's enough hate and vitriol in the world. I didn't want to build that into the books that I'm trying to escape from. So romance became that. Everybody loves a love story. Everybody can connect with those human emotions, and I don't need to be building out a world where everything's fallen to shit if that's the world that I'm trying to escape.
Totally. Yeah, no, I mean, I think escape is exactly the right word. I think it's why a lot of people certainly read love stories, or, I love my fantasy books too. It really is just about that outlet and having that escapism, really. Do you think you would ever venture outside the romance genre, or are you pretty happy sticking within it?
For now, I'm happy sticking in it. However, I do have some stories that drift outside of the contemporary aspect. I do have one that I've been in the outlining and plotting stage of a sci-fi romance that takes place over the course of 800 years. That one's a little bit different, not the traditional contemporary romance that I'm in right now. And then I've also got an idea for another story that's not quite romance, but more of a very a character study of sorts.
I'm curious, can you expand on that, what you mean by like a character study?
So that, I don't want to really give away too much, but it's basically, the idea of that story is it's capturing one day in a person's life. And this individual, he happens to spend most of his days at the local VFW, or the Veterans of Foreign Wars outpost. He's a former soldier, been deployed to wars and stuff, but he basically just is there and meeting so many different people, and it's kind of a study on how, even though he's impacting so many lives, it's also a study on how all those different people he's interacting with is impacting his own life in a one-day snapshot.
That sounds very interesting. I'll keep an eye out for that whenever you have it done. So now I read on your website, also I believe it's in the acknowledgments of the book, if I'm remembering correctly, that you've spent time as a military journalist.
Yes.
Do you feel like your time as a military journalist has influenced your writing beyond like character development?
No, absolutely. And I think it definitely impacts in that, my time in the military, I did spend a good bit of time writing the stories about soldiers go out to do an operation, they accomplish this task, and they moved on. I told many of those stories. But the stories that I really loved telling while I was in the service were Private Johnson came from Middle Tennessee. He left his family behind. He's out serving his country, and he's kind of doing things that he wouldn't otherwise be doing. He's and getting to tell his story. So there was my favorite story that I keep going back to from my time in the military. My second deployment over in Iraq, we had a kitchen manager at the dining facility on our base who was originally from New York. The food over while you're deployed is horrible. I don't recommend it to anybody. Definitely not a 5-star dining experience. But this guy, he was managing the kitchen, and he knew that the soldiers kind of needed a little something to kind of help give a pep in their steps every once in a while. So he reached back to family and friends and connections and stuff he had back in New York, and he got a pizza oven and like water shipped from Brooklyn and all that to make pizza for the soldiers once a month. And that was a story. It wasn't about feeding troops. It wasn't about accomplishing a task. It was about providing a source of comfort for people in an otherwise uncomfortable environment.
It kind of shows. Obviously, I've never been deployed, but I can imagine even those simple things like something like making a pizza, or it kind of allows for a sense of normalcy that maybe is something you're missing while you're overseas and away from home.
And I fell in love with kind of the beauty in the mundane is one way to put it. Like, normal everyday things going on that can be beautiful if in the right light.
You've already talked about your love story with your wife, but you have a whole series. It's the Elysian Serenade. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, that's the name of the ship.
Yes, and the Romantasea series. So, what was some more of the personal inspiration? Like, why cruise ships? That's a really unique setting for a romance book. So, um, what inspired this entire series? Because if you imagine if you were just writing a story about your, your love story with your wife, you maybe could have stopped at Scarlet Wave and Golden Shores, but you didn't. You're continuing this
Right.
whole series. So, tell me all about that.
So it did start out as, inspired by my own love story, and the fact that I met my wife on a cruise ship is fun and exciting, and it's a great talking point to get talking to people. But at the same time, we actually have many friends who have also met on a cruise ship. We have gone on cruises ourselves, been hanging out by the pool, talking to some random people, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we met on a cruise." So it's not from my standpoint, it's not as uncommon as it might think, and it kind of just led me down this road of there are so many different love stories that can be told, and the cruise ship is it's a fun environment that a character can separate from the real world. They can be their true, authentic self. There's a possibility that the people that you are meeting and interacting with during that 1 week of vacation, you will never see them again. So you kind of let your guard down. You let them see who you truly are. And a lot of times when you let your hair down and open up like that, it invites love when you're not expecting it in the least bit.
Yeah, I think there is something about that. I mean, I wouldn't call it anonymity, but about the fact that like your interactions with these people are contained in the cruise ship setting, that just sort of takes away that social fear, where maybe if someone sees the true you and they decide they don't like it, well, you're never going to see them again. So
Right,
there are
absolutely.
maybe fewer social consequences for that.
Yes, absolutely. And it has its drawbacks. You can fall for somebody and you might not never see them again. In my stories, I take the approach of, yes, you will see them again, but there's not necessarily that guarantee. And even just a 1 week fling on a cruise ship can still be a life-changing type of experience for somebody, in where it allows them to kind of just be a version of themselves that they didn't necessarily recognize from at home, and that can lead to some personal changes and stuff once they return as well.
This reminds me of Jerry a bit. So Jerry at the beginning of the book, he's very guarded. Seems
Yes.
like he has a difficult time with vulnerability. Reading it, I definitely felt like he was able to open up a bit more on the cruise ship. What is going on in Jerry's mind specifically that makes him feel free to open up more? Because he's someone where he just seems like a tougher nut to crack.
Yeah, no, it's definitely going back to that same thread of, he's on that cruise. He is not looking for love. He is looking for an opportunity to just kind of sit back, relax, and enjoy life for a week. He doesn't have those opportunities in his normal life, being a single parent with the 2 special needs kids, and then the military always deploying. He does not have time and space for vacations. And Mac really has to like push and pull, like, dude, you gotta take care of yourself. You cannot run yourself down to the ground. So reluctantly, Jerry does agree to that trip. But again, he's not on there looking for love. He's not even looking for a fling or nothing. He's looking just to relax, to reset, and so that way he can go home to be a better dad for his kids more full time. What he doesn't expect is to run into Scarlet on board. And that's where the fun in the story come in.
Reading the book, it also seems like he's resistant at first to, letting Scarlet in, even just to the extent like maybe this is just going to be a fling and just going to be for fun. He even seems a little hesitant to just that small amount of, connection with her.
Mm-hmm.
What's stopping him from even being open to like a temporary contained fling?
So a lot of it comes from just the heartbreak and pain from his prior marriage. He went through a very difficult divorce. His ex pretty much abandoned the children, so he is coming into the story with a hardened mindset already that, you know, love has abandoned him before, and he's not going to allow his own emotions to get abandoned like that again. And even beyond that, he refuses to let his kids suffer that same abandonment as well. So he's kind of double fold in that, you know, he's completely closed off to these romantic feelings for his own pain, but also to protect his kids.
That makes sense because Jerry's been dealt a really rough hand. This is a lot of hardship, like stacked one on top of the other. But sort of the sad or tragic thing about him was he couldn't even take the time to focus on himself because he did have these two kids that he needed to put first and think about first. But you do play with this idea of, if you're not taking care of yourself, it's hard to be able to take care of other people.
Yes, absolutely. And completely frank, Jerry is very much based on me. Before I met my wife, I was that single father. I was Jerry in taking care of those two special needs kids. I was active duty in the military. I was very lucky in my position with the military to where I was able to take time out to take care of the kids during work days and stuff, but I always had to go back and, you know, work extra at night sometimes after I got home, trying to help complement both sides of myself. And it became, you know, very difficult to even entertain the possibility of romance. A, there's no time for it. B, you know, not bringing any kids or anybody into the house for the kids to fall in love with, to them have them be not work out. So it was a difficult time. But I also wanted to make sure that I pointed out in Golden Shores that Jerry has a very strong support system around him. He has his mother who works for the airlines and is constantly traveling back and forth and able to take care of the kids when duty calls Jerry out of the country. He's got people within his unit that are able to cover for him or help alleviate some of his workload so that the kids can be taken care of. He's got the daycare giver. She's very good about, you know, helping out, you know, collecting the kids after school and doing all these other things while Jerry's at work. And then Mac, his best friend, is like loyal to a fault, basically, to where he is sacrificing his own life to help make Jerry's life a little bit better. And in doing so, he also pushes Jerry to get out and do something that is out of his comfort zone.
Jerry has this strong support system, which is so important, especially given how much he has to juggle. What else does it take for him to sort of overcome like some of the trauma he's dealing with? Because he has the support system at the beginning of the book, but it's not quite enough. He's still struggling. So what does it take? Maybe you can answer this from your like personal experience in creating this character and or from directly from the character's perspective, but what does it take either internally or externally to overcome that type of trauma?
So a lot of this book, Jerry is really struggling with allowing that openness. And even after he's met Scarlett and the cruise is over and the relationship is continuing beyond just that 1 week fling, he still struggles with completely being open or allowing Scarlett fully in. And it's really not until Scarlett herself takes a stand and says, no, stop trying to shut me out, and I want to be here for me. Scarlett saying, for me, I want to be here for you. Her being blunt on that. Later, during the deployment, Jerry's starting to regress some more, and then other external persons have to step in like, dude, just stop doing this and just enjoy the gift that you have with Scarlet. So between the his senior leaderships coming in and bluntly telling him to stop and that this is a destructive pattern that he's following, the chaplain who's kind of a mental health expert in a deployed environment, he's able to provide some assistance there, and then Mac always being by his side and helping to point Jerry back in the right direction. All of those support systems continue on even beyond just the cruise or the very immediate aftermath as well.
What does it take internally for Jerry? Like, because I'm hearing like these are some like of the external support systems, people holding him accountable. So once he's accepted that he needs help and he needs to work on this and he finds these resources, what's some of the inner work he has to do?
So a lot of the inner work is listening, honestly. He's got to, like, he has to get out of his own way. He's got to listen to the people around him. And then he has to really self-reflect on a lot of his emotional deficiencies and how he can correct those himself. He is by no means a perfect character. He is flawed to his core. But I think that's also what makes him a very interesting character, is that he continues to struggle, and it's not some magic wand of like self-realization in the middle of the story that he becomes a better person. He's going to continue to struggle. Even beyond the conclusion of this story, struggles are going to continue for him, and it takes continued determinants to focus on those struggles and continue getting better.
So you mentioned Scarlet at one point, and
Yes.
how she has this big moment where she basically calls him out for what feels like he's ghosting her. What is going on inside of Scarlet that makes her want to push through? Because, putting myself in her shoes, okay, it feels like I'm getting ghosted by this person, even though I'm putting in as much effort as I can to try to be there for them and be there for his family. What is going on inside her to make her go, okay, I need to keep pursuing this and keep pushing through, as opposed to being like, okay, I guess maybe he's not interested?
Mm-hmm. No, that's definitely a fair question, and that's part of why I wrote these books as a connected duet. Scarlet Wave explores all those questions. It explores, how she's doing in all this, and it kind of helps you gain an understanding of what's going through Scarlet's mind through all this. But the answer is she struggles with it as well. She struggles whether or not all the effort that she's putting into Jerry is worth it. And she also has a great support system. Her sister Jade, her best friend Cammie, and even while Jerry's deployed, she remains connected with Jerry's mother and the kids, and is continuing to try to stay there and be there. And that support system helps to reassure Scarlet, you put in this much effort, keep going. There are things going on with Jerry that we don't know, and don't abandon him until he gets back or anything like that, and you can find out what's really going on. But then that letter that Jerry writes to Scarlet towards the end of Golden Shores arrives to her at almost a breaking point for Scarlet, to where she is getting close to that end. And then that letter arrives broken and everything, and it kind of helps Scarlet understand and know all of this turmoil with Jerry has been worth it, and it's going to continue to be worth it in the future.
So what is she looking for that she finds in Jerry?
I think she's looking for that connection with somebody who is not, a typical relationship or anything. She has a rewarding career. She has a good family support structure around her, not necessarily, a partner and children or anything like that, but she has a very strong dynamic all around her, or very strong family community. What she doesn't have is a specific person who is going to stand by her side or ride with her through her own internal struggles and help her counteract her own demons.
What demons is she trying to counteract?
So I think for her, she had a relationship, a long-term relationship prior to Jerry. And she dealt with a traumatic event towards the end of that relationship that caused it all to fall apart. I don't want to go into specifics to, that Scarlet story, but she has long buried that traumatic event, or what she at least feels is a traumatic event. And she has kind of taken on the mantle of, I can overcome all of this on my own. I don't need to I don't need to have other people fix this thing that I dealt with. But in seeing Jerry also fight with his PTSD demons, she realizes that no, it's okay to open up to others. It's okay to let other people help you on a healing journey. And they both play off each other in that sort of way.
Yeah, definitely. It's very complimentary. So how has the path to indie publishing looked for you?
It's been interesting, to say the least. It's been rewarding in getting my own stories on paper and getting them out there to the world. For the most part, the response that I have gotten to the stories has been fairly well received for those that I've talked to about reading them and whatnot. So it's felt good from that aspect of, I'm putting myself out there, putting my own work at risk of criticism and whatnot. But at the same time, they have not launched any economic growth or anything like that. Not that I ever came into writing these stories looking to become a millionaire or anything like that by any means. But it has been it has been and continues to be a struggle of balancing I love the stories, I love what I'm doing, and I'm putting in a lot of effort and getting not a lot out of it type thing, or perceived to not be getting a lot out of it. So there continues to be that battle.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's totally understandable that, you love the stories, you love the writing, and it can be discouraging if you're not getting the feedback you're hoping for, or, the reception that maybe you're hoping for. I think that's a very relatable struggle as an author and a writer, for sure. What are some lessons learned along the way so far in your indie publishing journey? What mistakes you've made, advice you'd give to people just starting out?
I would say the biggest thing that I have learned and the biggest lesson has come back to write what you love, write for yourself first and foremost. Ultimately, you cannot write... the best stories are not written when you're writing to a conventional trope or when you're writing to sell a product. I feel like the best writing is when you're writing for your own heart, writing what you love, what you want to enjoy, and listening to the characters that are in your heart, not necessarily what popular demands of everything. If that makes sense.
Oh, totally makes sense. Yeah, I think I'm a big reader. I read a ton of books. And something I notice is sometimes I'll be reading a book, maybe it's like a smaller indie book or even a huge hit that's come out, where it will feel like almost like just another adaptation of another big popular book. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Where it's like, wait, I've read this story before. Like, why is it getting why is it getting rewritten over and over and over again? So just as a reader, I find it refreshing when I pick up a book and I'm like, oh, this is unique. Like, this is a reflection of the author's actual experience and their actual life. So obviously that's something you did in Golden Shores, which I appreciated as a reader for sure.
Yes, I try to bring that into all of my stories. And I will always be the type of writer who focuses on the character first. I love learning about these characters that are going into the stories and kind of diving into what makes these characters exciting or the way that they are. So that's fun for me, and I like doing that even more so than writing in terms of, oh, I got to get them from here to there.
So what about social media? How does your relationship with social media look like? How do you navigate that as an indie author?
I have a very disdain-hate for social media. It's a necessary evil that I struggle with. I, especially when I get into like heavy, like draft. I've lately been drafting my next story in the series, which is actually a direct sequel to Scarlet Wave and Golden Shores, focusing on Cammy and Mac this time. But in doing or being in the heavy drafting, my brain has kind of forgotten social media, and I have really struggled with even posting regular content or anything like that, because I'm so involved in wanting to get the next story going and working on that draft that I forget, oh, I still got to give love to everything else and keep reaching out to new readers, say, hey, come read these other stories. So I disdain social media, but I know and I understand that it's a necessary evil.
Yeah, I ask this question to every author I interview because I'm just curious to see if I will ever get a different answer. That term necessary evil comes up almost every single interview. Like, yes. There is not, and it makes sense because you didn't sign up to become a content creator. You signed up to become a writer and a storyteller. Right. And the social media aspect of it is so maddeningly frustrating because algorithms change. If you even feel like you have them figured out in the first place, they're going to just like switch on you the next day. Right. And you can put so much effort and creative energy and mental energy into creating a post and posting it, and it takes time, and that's all time. You could correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming you'd probably rather spend just writing your books.
Yes, absolutely. I'd much rather spend that time writing or at least editing the books, diving into getting new stories ready to share. But, yeah, necessary evil is definitely the best way to put everything.
Yeah, and I mean, such is the world we live in, like it's definitely, if you want to sell your books, I can't think of a better avenue than like to get it out there on social media and hope that, something catches on. But I don't know, I'm hopeful that maybe in the future there will be a different avenue for indie authors. I don't even know what that would look like.
Well, one thing that I appreciate is podcasts like yours where I get to come on and, we just have a conversation and talk about it. I think these type of conversations, they might not move the needle as far as sales or anything, but it really, for me, it's beneficial in getting to actually talk and share the story behind the words on the page. And so I'm very appreciative of you and others who do these similar podcasts. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's my pleasure. And I always have so much fun talking to the authors. And I'm also a part of a book club. And it's like kind of an overlap is in my book club, I always get more appreciation for the book when I discuss it with my friends and kind of dive a little bit deeper. And for sure when I speak to the actual author of the book about the inception of the story and their writing process, that appreciation for the story is like even deeper. So it's a win-win for me. So this is the last question I always ask, and it's one of my favorite questions. And it is, what books inspire you? What are some, or movies or TV shows, just like works of art that have inspired your writing that you love to read. What are some of your favorites?
There are so many. I have been a watcher of rom-com movies for decades. Like I love a good heartfelt, two people meet cute, fall in love, shenanigans happen. I love those type of films. I've always loved that type of storytelling. As I have progressed in my writing career, I've drifted a lot towards some of those similar tropes and stuff in the books that I'm reading. There's been a lot of local authors to me here in Orlando that I've picked up their books and kind of not necessarily to read or enjoy them, but to kind of get an understanding of where different writers are taking their stories and stuff, especially where I can read their books and then go talk to them at an event or luncheon or something like that and kind of delve deeper into the character dynamics. There's a show on Hulu right now. They just published their final season, The Bear. That one, I've fallen in love with that as a series, based just the character storytelling that they do in there and how deep they dive into individual struggles of each of the characters. They actually did one prequel episode that actually inspired that VFW story I told you about earlier, where it's just a one day inside the bar. So those are some of them. I could probably go on for an hour listing, every great book or anything out there. That there's just so many.
There are so many. But were there anything else that you wanted to shout out real quick?
So one book that I have read probably a dozen times, and it's not a fiction book. It's not romance or nothing. But this is one. What Everybody Is Saying by Joe Navarro. I picked it up when I was in the military, and I used to, whenever we were deployed, I would actually pick up poker as kind of a side activity when we weren't working and stuff. And I picked up this book from a body language reading aspect. And it's written from the standpoint of a CIA interrogation standpoint and understanding the body's telling truths that the mouth isn't. But as far as my writing goes, it has also informed a lot in capturing specific body tells for my characters. And sometimes the character can be saying one thing, but their body is reacting in a different way. And I try to layer that in to help seed some mistrust, not some mistrust with the readers, but mistrust from the characters themselves, and that they're not fully honest with themselves yet.
That's cool. I love that. Yeah, just sneaking in like those like little body language tells that make the story feel more realistic, I guess, like breathes more life into the characters. That's awesome. Right. JD Harbour, thank you so much for being on the Authors on Audio podcast. It was such a pleasure speaking with you today.
Thanks. Same to you.